Let's talk about that provincial budget for a few minutes. What does Ontario's recent budget mean for Kawartha Lakes? And I know we got to break that down in many ways. Maybe we could start with federal gas tax funding.
Yeah, well, the gas tax funding, the federal government, obviously, in their federal budget, gave us a good chunk of extra gas tax money this year, sort of a one-time $4.6 million boost. As far as the province goes, they were going to raise the gas tax. There was a previous commitment from 2 to 4 cents. For municipalities for transit, and this government has chosen to leave it at 2 cents. So we weren't in that boat, but some municipalities that were budgeting, in the future for that increase funding for their transit system, some of the bigger urban areas are obviously going to have to readjust their budgets. So as far as the gas tax funding, the provincial gas tax is for transit, and we do have a transit system in the Lindsay area, so we'll be able to utilize what we have and obviously need to spend it wisely. That's
great, and we have provincial cannabis funding as well?
We do, yeah. We got about $220,000 for cannabis to make a bit of a transition over into enforcement and how we could use it for educational purposes. There's a pretty strict criteria of what we're allowed to use it for. We haven't been approved for any retail outlets in the city of Kawartha Lakes as of yet in the first round, but we did receive the money, so Council's chosen to put it into a reserve for now. We'll work with our Board of Education, with our bylaw and our police force, and just sort of figure out where can this best be utilized as this program rolls out if we ever do get approved for a retail store.
Do we know how that works for the next round of retail stores?
I don't. No, I actually don't. They had 25 that were approved at first. I think their plan is once those 25 are open across Ontario, they're probably going to look at another 25. But I know it's based on supply, and as soon as they can meet the supply demands, demand and supply and demand, I guess you call it, as soon as they can meet that demand, then they will probably open up more retail outlets. But we do have a few applications that were put in but didn't get approved for any. So.
Okay. The provincial funding for efficiency purposes, I believe there was $750,000 there.
We did. We got a one-time grant of about $725,000. It's kind of year-end money for the provincial government. As municipalities, we keep telling the province that we know how to spend money wisely. You don't need to keep putting conditions, when you give us grants. So they're sort of saying and all municipalities got this. Here's some money that we had left over at year end, use it wisely. We're being told to use it for efficiencies, knowing that there's going to be some cuts coming in the future, as we've already seen in this budget. So don't waste it, spend it wisely, invest it in programs where you can, as a city, can try to find more efficiencies and do your business model a little bit better. Now, a lot of those, luckily enough, in the past few years, the City of Kawartha Lakes has done their core service review, and we've changed some businesses around already, our business model. So I think we're a little bit ahead in that game, and we've already found some efficiencies, but we've also chosen to put that money into a reserve for now till we can figure out the most efficient way to use it, because we know it's not going to be a continuous source of funding.
Okay, and maybe you could break down the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund.
Yeah, the OMPF funding is some funding that we get. Most municipalities get it. It's used for infrastructure. It's used for different things in the city that we use. It's an unconditional grant. And we apply it to a lot of our roads and bridges. And they've committed to that funding. I don't think they're going to increase it in the near future. The other fund that we get is an OSIF fund we get from the provincial government. That was supposed to go, the previous government had committed taking that from $200 million to $300 million across the municipalities. And from what I understand that's for communities less than 100,000 people. It's an Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund. And what they do is they're not going to take it from the 200 to the 300 million. They're just going to keep it at 200 million. So again, not necessarily cutting funding to municipalities, but not granting those increases that the previous government had sort of committed to in the long term.
Have we talked about public transit yet? 20.8 billion, that's part of the
Yeah, there's going to be quite a list of different application-based funds coming out over the rest of the year between the federal and the provincial government. Transit's going to be one of them. They're committing to some good money there. Housing, wastewater, arenas for recreation. There's going to be several different funds rolling out over the rest of the year that you can apply for shovel-ready projects. luckily got a lot of shovel-ready projects ready to go. So hopefully our staff will jump on these applications as they become available, and try to sort of take projects that are in our long-term financial plan and move them up. You know, rather than adding new projects, is accelerate them, and then that'll take pressure off the back end of our fund. There's also a lot of, you know, when you talk about healthcare and the ambulance services and housing, there's a lot of provincial issues in there. You know, the education cuts that in this budget that the province is doing, and those are ultimately going to affect our residents as well. So they're not a direct impact on the municipality, but when you say how does the provincial, you know, budget affect municipalities, I mean, it affects all. You know, healthcare is available to all our residents and our ambulance services. So when they start consolidating these services and finding hopefully a better way, you know, to deliver them to our residents, we're all going to be affected by it. Not so much by the dollars and cents, but you know, some things need to change, and I think that's pretty obvious. We can't keep going the way things are going and pretending that it's working. We can't just keep piling on the debt at the provincial, municipal, or federal level. So I'm always complimentary of a government that tries to find new ways to do business. I won't weigh in on each way that they're going or each thing that they're trying to do, but you know what, we need to find a better way. We need to turn it on its head and shake it a little bit, and I think that's what they're doing, and it's going to affect some people, and I think it's going to affect people right across the board, and hopefully as a municipality and as a province we'll come out of it more financially viable, which is just going to keep us with better options in the future as we move forward. One of the other areas they cut as well was the less funding to conservation authorities for flood control. And obviously up in the north at this time of year, we're having, you know, the Burnt River, the Fenland area, and up in the Coboconk area, we're having some issues with the rivers flooding. So, you know, that's a bit of a concern, but that's not a whole lot of money to our conservation authority. It's about a $25,000 reduction in funding to them. So, you know, we'll still be able to do what it is that we need to do. Some conservation authorities are going to be affected more than ours is. Now we have 3 or 4 conservation authorities in the municipality, but our biggest one is Kawartha, you know, Kawartha Conservation. So everything, you know, everything in every budget affects us in one way or another, whether they're a resident living on a river or whether you're, you know, need to call an ambulance for healthcare. So, you know, we're all sort of in this together, and sometimes we forget there's only one taxpayer. So every budget doesn't just affect a municipality, but it affects, you know, the residents in that municipality as well. So
what are some of those shovel-ready projects that you mentioned earlier in this chat?
The Ops Arena, for one, is we've got a consultant coming in to do sort of a plan to refurbish that entire arena. It'll be quite a big project. It's old, it's tired, and it's leaking, and we need to do it. It won't be brand new, but it'll be a complete refurbishment. So that should tie in nicely with some of these applications that are coming forward. So we'll have our consultant sort of prepare the plan about what needs to be done. And hopefully in the fall, when, you know, this application grant comes available, we're able to utilize some of that funding and take advantage of it to complete projects that we already have on the go, as well as roads and bridges, you know, that we have in our list in our 5-year roads plan. There's always projects that we're ready to go. Downtowns, you know, Lindsay's being redone, Fenland's coming up next, so there's no shortage of work in the municipality that we need to do. So we've got a lot of things on the go right now, and I think we're heading in a really good direction. And some of these grants or timing is going to be ideal for hopefully we'll be able to take advantage of them and move forward. So council will be using the funding wisely, we've covered, and knowing that the funding is going to decrease in the coming years? Yeah, I mean, we've been told that, you know, we need to be less reliant on other levels of government as a municipal government, and I think we're hearing that, we're seeing that, we're getting some of this one-time federal gas tax funds to, you know, to do some work. We're getting some transitional funding from the provincial government, as we talked about. So I really think it's, you know, the message is pretty clear. Some of the grants that we've been getting are frozen for this year, but next year we'll expect to see a bit of a decrease. So our council's taken some really good steps to, you know, again, goes back to my previous business case about why we need to build up healthy reserves, right? So we can sort of go through the peaks and the valleys. You know, we get a little bit extra money, let's put it in a reserve. We have 1 year where we get less funding, let's take it out of the reserve, and then it's a more consistent to our ratepayers, you know, in the municipality, where we're not sort of hitting them hard 1 year when the province, you know, takes a lot. There's a lot of funding we get from the different levels of government that we have no control over. And that's sometimes a little bit scary when you're doing budgets, because you're just making assumptions that funding is going to be the same. So when it's not the same, it's nice to have a little bit of room there, a little bit of wiggle room to, you know, to be able to sort of work your way through it. So
Right.
Yeah, I think it'll help us a lot.